And welcome back to ISBM's Big Talk, the Thriving Marketer. So glad you would join us for the next session. This next session goes from 10:30 to 11:30. And I'll remind you again that each of the sessions has its own link. So please go back to your invite to find the link for each of our sessions during today and tomorrow. So today I would like to introduce our next speaker. Let me give you a few housekeeping reminders before I get into talking about Suj and this great presentation we're going to hear. First is if you're just joining us for the first time, you'll see at the bottom of your panel a Q&A button, and you can click that at any time during this presentation. You don't have to wait to the end and type a question. And I'll be monitoring those all during the session and then providing those back to Suj to answer at the end. And again, if you have questions or you're having concerns, you can also type into that Q&A box or you can hit the help button. So again, thank you very much for joining us. And let me go now to introduce an introduction for Suj Chandrasekhar. Dr. Chandrasekhar is the founder and principal at Strategic Insights, a business strategy and consulting firm. Strategic Insights specializes in marketing, sales, and new product development strategies. She helps organizations implement marketing and sales integration concepts and frameworks in a practical way and works with corporations to optimize investments in sales, marketing, and new product development. She's a frequent speaker at company industry events. Suj is a co-author of the Harvard Business Review classic Ending the War Between Sales and Marketing with Philip and Neil Rackham. And her work and research with Phil Kotler and Rob Walcott on marketing and product development has been featured in the Wall Street Journal and the MIT Sloan Review. She's currently working on a global research product on value management in marketing, sales, and new product development. And she's a contributing author to the book India's Global Powerhouses by Harvard Business Publishing, 2009. I think you're going to find this presentation fascinating. It's built on data that comes from our membership and for our membership, and I hope that you'll take advantage of the opportunity to ask Suj questions as she has such a wide range of experience in these areas for us. So I'm going to turn it over to Suj now, and there you go. Brad.
Good morning, everybody. Delighted to be here with you all to talk about the Thriving Marketer. And this particular presentation comes from some of the research we conducted on behalf of ISBM about, we started this earlier this year. And then now we're going to talk about the implications of that research as well as what does one have to be a thriving marketer in today's challenging times. The research objectives specifically were to look at the implications of the changing landscape for marketers and the marketing function. And then we also wanted to look at what are the roles of a thriving marketer. And then in this new landscape, how should the marketing function architect its relationship with its internal and external stakeholders? Now, that definitely is a challenging question today with all the changes that are going on. And then how can the marketing function uniquely leverage marketing analytics to inform strategy and tactics within the organization? This applies both to upstream and downstream marketing. Then finally, what are the specific competencies and skills needed by marketers in the various marketing roles to be prepared to be effective in this new era? So as you can tell, we had a tall order in terms of research objectives, and we were extremely fortunate in terms of the data collection, the people we talked to, as well as the findings. So the methodology was we did interviews with a cross-section of executives from different industries, 45 executives to be precise, group discussions with the representatives cross-section of ISBM members, interviews and discussions with 15 academic experts, and finally detailed secondary research of megatrends and implications of all that is going on around for the world of marketing. What did we hear from marketing professionals? Well, it was a set of very interesting findings. As we all know that the definition of marketing and the relationship between marketing and different functions has evolved over a period of time. Typically, it has gone from undefined, saying marketing perform the functions that it was needed to define, saying marketing had very specific responsibilities in terms of what was defined, to align, that is, marketing is now being aligned with many business opportunities. And in fact, some organizations took it all the way to be an integrated function between marketing and other functions. In some respects, some of the marketing professionals we talked to felt that we may be reversing the trend and marketing may be going back to having more of an undefined role. And this was a little bit of a disturbing trend when they voiced it. Increasingly, marketing is viewed as a support function, gradually being moved away from being at the center of strategy discussions to being more of a sidebar. And then R&D and innovation functions consider marketing as a deterrent to progress. This was something that came up again. Finally, one of the things that was a big topic was about analytics. While marketing could provide a lot of insights from analytics, IT seemed to own analytics, was something that we heard, and this makes marketing's job kind of difficult because they have to queue up and they are required to somewhat perform according to other functions dictating how marketing should be, parlaying what comes out of analytics to the rest of the organization. The one thing that was interesting was marketing's somewhat strained relationship with sales, finance, procurement, and R&D. Now, when we say strained, it doesn't mean a drawn-out battle. It means a lack of understanding of these other functions of what marketing can provide and how marketing really needs to have an enhanced budget and enhanced voice in order to help organizations. Digitization is a double-edged sword. Marketing can shine if it is able to orchestrate alignment. This was very clear. In organizations where marketing owned the journey, marketing was perceived as a platform. As it leads to my next comment, marketing was king. And this was a very interesting comment from one of the executives that marketing is king or pauper, meaning either we own it all or we've been completely reduced to being a sideline conversation in many respects. And last but not the least is the role of marketing is perceived as ambiguous and clearly needs to be redefined. And this was loud and clear across the board that there is a lot of ambiguity. And if there is any consolation, this happens to be the case with business in general, with many other functions in general, and marketing kind of straddling so many different functions, right, between strategy, aligning with sales, making sure that value propositions are in place, making sure channel relationships work, being at the center of so many different responsibilities. I think the ambiguity has really hit hard. So we then turned to some secondary sources. We kind of really went deep into looking through a lot of published reports from various consulting firms, including Deloitte, Accenture, PwC, Bain, McKinsey, as well as a lot of the academic journals. And then as part of also, we had some deep insights into some confidential white papers that had been written up in various organizations that we work with. And what did we hear? Well, it was kind of interesting to see how, on the one hand, we heard that there was a growth in the role of marketing. And then, of course, there are challenges facing marketers. Well, the growth in the role of marketing, clearly, there was a report that came out and said 81% of CMOs report that marketing's role in organization is broadened. That's very good news. 11% reported significant increase in that role, expanding duties in social media, marketing analytics, and CMOs expected a 7% yearly budget increase. Marketing budget as percent of total budget is 11% in August 2016. That was then compared to 8% in February 2011. In general, they saw an uptick in the budgets. They saw an uptick in some of the roles and responsibilities. And yet there was, in some ways, a somewhat diminished influence of marketing, which kind of speaks to the fact that there is a general dissipation of functions and influence, and there is an ambiguity in how these are perceived. Challenges facing marketing, well, it's not leading all the important strategic activities. It is doing a lot more of activities, but not necessarily leading all the strategic activities. So if there's an increase in the budget, we're doing a lot more things, but they seem to have somewhat been more dispersed. Marketing excellence ratings are flat. Social media expenditures have increased from 4% of marketing budgets to 12%, which is in general showing how important this is. However, despite increase in social media spending, markets report little progress improving the impact of social media, 44% unable to show impact. Now, this hits a really, really strong point, the point of ROI. Marketing departments everywhere being asked to prove the ROI, being asked to show what is the ROI on what is the spend that is being made. And as we know, a lot of times these are not immediate and short-term ROIs. These take a long time to show and prove, and that's where the education role of marketing was emphasized by the people we talked to. We need to educate our colleagues that it's not that I spend $1 million this year and I'm going to get the impact right away. If I don't spend the $1 million, what happens? The cost of not spending. And so this whole thing of ROI improving impact loomed large. The next slide I'm going to look at is the implication of digital trends for B2B marketing. So clearly, and this comes from Gartner, there's a growth of digital, and there are challenges in dealing with that. As you can tell from the slide, there is that 98% of marketers saying that digital methods are merging into the larger marketing ops. 73% now own or share P&L for digital, and 57% of CMOs planning to increase content development budgets, major growth in B2B, and enterprise software adoption. Now, let's look at some of the challenges that are kind of coming out as a result of that. Given that majority of the buying is online, building a performance-based culture, incorporating the complexities of managing these multiple channels is pretty daunting. Technology vendors for production, automation, and process currently pay very little attention to marketing ROI, and that is changing, as I emphasized before, very rapidly. We need to understand and quantify which channels attract, engage, and convert the right customers, and this makes it particularly complex if marketing is not leading the strategy and the focus up front, because once again, we have dispersed spend, and trying to calculate all of these, amount all of these into a cumulative ROI becomes challenging when marketing is not at the center of the strategy discussion. What are some of the major trends in general deserving of marketing's attention? So, I'm sorry, let me go back here. So if we looked at what's going on in the business world in general, so if you looked at trends in general, but from 2015, 2016, 2017. Let's just look at the top bar in 2017. So AI is the new UI, which is meaning artificial intelligence is really the new user interface, right? We all talked about user interface. Now, AI and robotics pretty much dominate that. Ecosystem power, I mean, what happens around and within, which is why platforms have become so important. Workforce marketplace, I mean, this is where competencies go much beyond everything else, and the design is for humans, and there is an uncharted territory out there. So the reason I'm kind of placing this is that the context. If marketers are feeling a challenge, and marketers are feeling that they are not being placed in the center of the strategy argument or the strategy discussions, one way that facilitates that is making sure that marketing's context is within the realms of these larger trends that are going on. And some of the points we make later in the presentation shows how. Implications, for example, for a trend like mobile media, right, for marketing. Some of the key questions, the implications on how you take a macro trend like that and bring it down to marketing. One of the questions we need to ask is, how embedded is digital in your product offering, in your business? Digital is more than digital ads or just digital marketing, right? Products themselves need to be changed, adapted, evolved, so that there is a timeline and there is a cadence to this. So marketing's biggest question there is, how does it play within the realm of the larger business trends, and how does that improve how the organization moves itself from one point to another in the competitive environment. The second question there is, are you present in the micro moments and the moments that matter, especially on mobile? People check phones 150 times a day. So what we're getting at is, even in terms of marketing looking at its own ROI, I think the importance here is looking at how well we're doing in terms of the metrics we set for ourselves, but also to look at the metrics in the context of the larger business metrics, and even to influence the organization in terms of the metrics it's going to look at. Are you taking advantage of the data that's now available at your fingertips to connect dots? This is a question marketing can easily raise with its counterparts in sales, in purchasing, out at the C-suite at all levels. Help them make better decisions and achieve better outcomes. How are you bringing different marketing channels together in a new way for new experiences in this new normal? So what we're saying is marketing in general, raising the bar and raising the platform of questions for the business in general will help marketing contribute more from its standpoint to the larger business issues. Finally, what are you as a marketer, as a marketing team doing to foster what we call being faster, more agile, and thinking 10 times, right? Buying with one click in one areas increases expectations in all other areas. So in general, marketing leading the discussion of competitive advantage. Now, marketing has always done this in the past. It's just that the very forces that determine competitiveness are all over, as we saw in that, all the way from artificial intelligence to uncharted territory. So which means marketing's questioning the organization to see if every step of the way its value propositions are in keeping with these changing times is going to be one of the most important contributions. Excuse me. Marketing's many hat throughout the user experience. And this was a very interesting chart for me. I think if you looked at the different roles that key businesses play today, curator, advisor, orchestrator. Of course, there are some examples here between Spotify and Metasbot and Amazon, Alexa. But if you looked at marketing's role and said, in some places, you suggest relevant options based on previous user behavior. In certain circumstances, you become an advisor. That is, you're learning from, but also taking action for guiding the user towards optimal outcomes. But in certain others, you become an orchestrator and even a challenger in that, learning from past action, collaborating tasks across multiple channels to achieve desired outcomes. And these are not necessarily something that's happened in a linear fashion within each product line. I think what is challenging is these can happen simultaneously for different product lines and at different buying cycles. And so this means all the more reason that marketing's role is absolutely indispensable for organizations. And the more the organizations at the top understand this pivotal role and the pivotal contribution marketing can bring, the better the organization is going to be in terms of competitive positioning. Helping organizations understand what's possible as partnerships grow. So this is another critical element in the evolution of the role of marketing. I think apart from understanding customers' journey, apart from understanding the buying behavior, apart from understanding the market dynamics and share, we're now looking at, in general in the business world, at an unprecedented time for building partnerships and leveraging partnerships. Competencies are no longer just what you have within the organization or just within your immediate ecosystem. Competencies are now king, and how you leverage partnerships to make sure that you're ahead of the journey of the people who buy your products and services, of the people who experience you, is going to be pivotal in how well products and services, and we have in the last bubble there, data plus trust plus partnership. That almost seems to be a winning formula for a lot of the organizations. Now I'm going to take you through a couple of concepts which are not really novel or new. They've been around in the field of marketing and in strategy for a long time. One of them is value management. Most people are very familiar with value management, but I think the discipline of value management has become extremely critical today, not just in how marketers lead marketing organizations and their respective functions, but in how marketing can really help the larger organization understand how value is delivered, and most importantly, how value is co-created with constituents. This little depiction here kind of simplifies the model. We start with value identification, which is really, extent to which elements in our offerings deliver on relevant customer needs. We are all very familiar with that. Value assessment generally is extent to which quantification tools are used to measure and track value delivered, and this is kind of a competitive element. It has a competitive element to it. Value proposition, the most important and critical element in an organization. And today, and we see that in general with all functions, whether it's sales or whether it's with procurement or with any other organization, any other function, value propositions are up front and center. And unfortunately, value propositions are not being devised the way they should be. Most people are coming up with value propositions in somewhat of, the thinking is somewhat limited. And this is another place where marketing can really help to make sure that the identification, the assessment process goes through before you come to value proposition. And then, of course, there's a value communication process, which is very critical. But what is important in all of this is not that this is something new that marketers are going to do. They've always done this. But this has become very critical today when there are so many changes and complexities going on there, and value delivery is kind of a moving target. And what customers are looking for is co-creation of value. And to be able to communicate that I'm co-creating value with you, and the value proposition here is really that we are co-creating this value, is going to be mission critical for organizations, and marketers can really help organizations achieve that. The next slide here is kind of more of a depiction of what's going on out there. This comes from the work of Eric Brynjolfsson, and there's a new book called Machine Platform Crowd. And I think it shows very clearly how there is an evolution today from mind to machine, product to platform, and core to crowd. That is, machines are more and more taking over what the human mind was attempting to do, and we still need people. Of course, not that, but this whole thing of AI and robotics is up front and center. Products are giving away to platform, and core competencies are not necessarily what you have within the organization. It's crowd, it is what is out there. So given that that is the general vantage point, kind of put together a little chart here to show how the marketing function can kind of leverage all of this, right? So you have end users, customers, we have channel partners, we have alliance partners, we have community served, and of course we have all of the functions in between that we try to do, all the way from value propositions that we are coming up with our customers and products, value propositions that we come up for the internal functions. The value propositions that we do for alliance partnerships, making sure that mind share and wallet share, all of the traditional marketing functions. But what happens is all the other elements that we call as enablers down there, which is digital technology, data analytics, marketing mix, technology roadmaps, customer decision journey, playbooks, these become enablers just not for the marketing function, but for the organization as such, right? And all the more reason for marketing to educate the rest of the organization on how this transition that organizations are making into the machine platform crowd world cannot happen without the pivotal role of marketing. And so if there is a context that marketing needs to take in terms of how it leads and defines its future roles, it's within this larger context and how it's helping organizations move the needle through the value management. That is, how do we deliver, co-create better value in a world that is moving from mind to machine, product to platform, core to crowd. And I think if marketers can position the marketing function as leading the journey it would be for the betterment of organizations and business in general. There's another concept that I would like to bring up here, and this comes from the work of Ranjay Gulati and Kletter. This was done way back in 2005, but I think it's one of the most important pieces of research that came out. It actually interfaces between organizational strategy and marketing, and today this becomes an extremely important model. They talk about what is called as a relationship-centric organization, and talk about organizations having to focus on relational capital between four important constituents: suppliers, customers, alliances, and the organization itself. So, and this is, you can actually simplify it and say, if you looked at and say between suppliers, customers, alliances, and organizations, it's basically figuring out, for example, as a supplier, understanding, am I a technical vendor, am I a bundler, am I an integrator, or am I a strategic partner? Similarly, if, from a customer standpoint, figuring out, is this a commodity, is it a branded offering, loyalty, or solution? And from an alliance standpoint, figuring out, is this transactional, contractual, relational, or integrated? And most importantly, making sure the organizational subunit or the organizational units are all aligned so that there's seamless integration to be able to deliver what they call as the relational capital or the relationship-centric organization. The premise of this argument was that the better the relational capital of the organization, the better it's positioned to be competitive. And today this holds so true. If you put this in the center of how organizations should be looking at their competencies, marketing becomes mission critical. Who better than marketing to help the organization build a relational capital that actually balances out the value proposition that's being delivered between suppliers, customers, alliances, organizational subunits, and how this is being co-created on an ongoing basis, balancing out the larger challenges of the transition from mind to machine, product to platform, and core to crowd. So if we looked at these three charts that I just went through, it almost feels like marketing's role is more pivotal than we ever imagined before, and organizations are probably being compromised if marketing's function is being somewhat belittled. And it feels like this is a time for educating organizations on understanding how marketing can clearly be the function to move the needle for the organization by balancing out all of this simply because of the competencies that marketing has between analytics, between understanding customers, between understanding value propositions, and being able to make sure that the delivery of the value is consistent across all parameters. The next few slides, in the interest of time, I'm not going to go over in detail, but you can, at your leisure, go through them. This basically expands on each of those four categories we just talked about. It's for the suppliers, for the customers, for the alliances, and for the internal units. So it just expands on all of those. It's exactly what we talked about, but making sure that we understand the ladder and making sure that the value that we are creating is commensurate and consistent with the ladder, the step of the ladder that we are on. And I think orchestrating this is going to be quite critical in going forward. Marketing's pivotal role in strategizing for organic growth. So the next couple of charts really show from some of the studies that McKinsey did as to what really is going on with companies that pursue growth. And if you looked at some of the research that's come out, apparently most companies tend to pursue a single strategy for organic growth, generating organic growth. However, what is more effective is pursuing multiple strategies. And if you go through this process of pursuing multiple strategies for growth, clearly marketing is the one that can orchestrate this. And it's quite unfathomable how any organization can do this without the benefit of creating value propositions that are relevant for these multiple strategies. And one of the things that we kind of gleaned in talking to the various executives was that when they pursue multiple strategies, some of the strategies just get dropped because people are not able to take it from thought to finish. And the next few slides basically kind of walk you through the process of making sure that you are going on a ladder that clearly helps you go from a single strategy to multiple strategies. And when you look at what really leads some of these companies when they are highly successful, regardless of the growth path, culture and branding are common strengths among top growth companies. And once again, pointing to the direction that just what we talked about, the culture being want to be able to orchestrate the co-creation of value, and branding being the making sure that the brand essence is consistent, something that marketers have always owned. These two have to happen in tandem in order for organization to keep their competitive advantage. Once again, pointing to the direction that it behooves marketing to ensure that organizations place marketing at the helm of affairs so we can ensure this consistent growth. The next slide talks about data and analytics and the importance of that we all know, and once again points to one of the core competencies of marketing and how important it is. And what we take away from these slides is if you looked at companies that are highly successful, they're pursuing multiple strategies, they are high on analytics, high on branding, extremely oriented towards a co-creation of value culture, once again point to the fact that how could you possibly do any of this without marketing being at the center. Finally, a few thriving marketer illustrations, and we will quickly go through them and then open up for some questions. These were illustrations that we picked up from various examples. One of the most important ones that we found was from GE, and this was actually articulated by Beth Comstock in one of her presentations. And they talk about GE's marketing platform and having 4 organizational capabilities that were developed primarily to invite innovation. And I think a common theme that came out is marketing's role in innovation is suffering. Marketing is not being put at the center of the table when we're talking about new products, and R&D looks at marketing, as we saw in our research, as somewhat of a threat. So here is some illustration on how GE is managing to make marketing as a platform to enable innovation. First, create marketing innovation internally, integrate collaboratively within GE, collaborate with the customer, and collaborate with entrepreneurs. In some of the research that we had done with GE in our marketing and sales and new project alignment, it was very clear that this platform level thinking came from corporate, and then it was actively disseminated to the various business units. And how they made it come alive within their business units was up to them. But the platform level thinking was clearly something that came from corporate as a result of bringing together experts, internal and external, and figuring out how marketing can be the lever for this innovation. Here is an example from a tech company on thriving marketer best practices, and this is about agile marketing and how they set up some small, fast-acting, cross-discipline teams to conceptualize and implement new products. Team leaders call this, they were called Scrum Masters, just for the fun of it. And they set schedules, kept people on track. Analytics had played a very important role in this, and multiple small teams developed over team, and they came together and they went out. And so it was in waves, but they kept it fluid, but marketing still articulated and orchestrated the process of this value creation. The next chart again shows a little bit of an agile war room team, that these are all examples of how marketers are reorganizing and reconceptualizing how they bring together their competencies to make sure that the organization can see the value with a larger context. Then the next slide is really, once again, talking about leading with platform-level marketing. And we talk about service providers, customers, and then the aggregators, which is combining services and adding value. The important thing to note here is this is not linear. So combining services and adding value is you're doing this in a very complex environment, and you're doing this at an unprecedented pace and doing it at a very, very high level and at different levels at the same time. So this is one of the things that organizations struggle with different levels of their customers, and even the internal functions start to look to marketing a lot of times for what is the new value proposition, or how do I make sure that the value proposition that I had when I started on this journey is still relevant. Finally, we just have a few examples here for you in terms of showing what a sample 100-day and 365-day plans look like. And these have been adapted from some of the research that we saw from Accenture and Deloitte, and kind of shows you, kind of walks through how some organizations rank and prioritize how they can interface something like artificial intelligence with marketing. For example, rank in priority, order your customer interactions by how critical they are to your current revenue and future growth. These are high-level questions. Clearly, this is not something marketing department just does, the marketing function just does by itself. This is a dialogue that they highly encourage with all levels of the organization. Pick the top 3 to 5 interactions, work with your service and product teams to streamline customer engagement with your most valued products and services. Now you can see how AI can actually improve future interactions. So what you're doing is making sure that you're bringing the history of research and analytics and the past knowledge that marketing has in understanding customer decisions and journeys to what could be, and helping the organization interpret it in the context of what needs to happen and what needs to happen now, as opposed to having engineering firms or R&D teams just look at what are the immediate implications and let's go make this happen. And this is where the historical context and the larger analytical depth that marketers can bring to this, alongside keeping the brand intact, is almost priceless. Let's look at the 365-day plan, for example, and this is taking it at a higher level. So implement increasingly sophisticated artificial intelligence personas that not only curate or advise, but also aim to orchestrate as much as possible among your brand and ecosystem stakeholders for key customer interactions. So you're looking at your customers and your customer's customer. Now, taking this customer's journey through some of your roadmaps, both technology as well as the interface roadmaps, is another critical marketing function that has become quite important in organizations. And so where this is done well, going back to our initial comment of king or pauper, where marketing is king, marketing is pivotal in taking some of these even very cutting-edge trends and what we would say as interpreting these to become more relevant and highly meaningful and profitable engagements for the organization. So if you go through the next item here, develop analytics that take account of front-end customer insights and back-end business intelligence to better understand key customer interactions. This seems to be particularly important, history. Because what happens is some people are new to some functions that are new to analytics, seem to jump on what they see. And I think marketing's unique advantage of having the historical knowledge of how journeys and how the interpretation happens sometimes gives a very unique advantage in making sure that you're not jumping to value props that will only go away in the short run. And finally, develop and pilot a training program for AI teams to cross-train and implement AI. So training is another critical function where marketing can play an increasingly important role. And we see that HR teams and training development teams are bringing marketing into the core. So brand training is not just for customer-facing functions. Brand training is for everyone in the organization, and sometimes brand training for customers themselves to understand their customers' journeys and how this organization can help them better. Then finally, to improve customer service, design the new customer journey, where AI serves as your frontline brand ambassador for customer service interactions, communications, and engagements with the customers. And I'm kind of going to go through the next couple slides a little quick so we have some time for questions. This is for marketing-led growth platform. So I have some clear examples that you can peruse at your convenience. This is about conducting an audit, identifying how many internal and external platforms there are. If platform is king, what does platform really mean? This is where marketers can take on the role of an educator. You can be a platform-level educator for the organization. And finally, if you go through the 365-day plan, this kind of extends a significant portion of a core business function to a third-party platform. Don't worry about having to do everything internally. I think this is understanding the transition from making sure that you're going from core to crowd. What is important that the organization keeps its core competencies and keeps it at a level that's advantageous to the organization. So if you go through these four that we have here, it gives you an example of a sample 365-day plan. Finally, marketing leading the way. I think with the relentless pace of change, we can really help businesses rewrite the new rules of engagement. The important thing to note here is that marketing is in a very, very unique position to help understand relationships with stakeholders. No other function in the organization understands that. And if we're talking platform-level organizations, platform-level marketing, the most important role of marketing is to use its entire repertoire of skill sets and tools to enable this relational capital within the organization that enables the organization to become a winning forerunner in whatever it's doing. So leadership now means leadership with customers, partners, external agencies, and making sure that this is as fluid as it can be using marketing talent to do that. So basically, I think I'm going to conclude with that and open it up to questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Suj. I know there was a lot to try and get through in 40 minutes, and I'll let you come back to those slides if you need to answer some of the questions that we've had that came in. So now to the audience again, if you would please feel free to type in your questions in the Q&A tab. I have several queued up, and I'll just take them as they come. So Suj, the first one that I'd like to pose to you is one that's an interesting discussion. So you mentioned earlier a reversing trend of marketing and sales alignment. So how does that fit the need for stronger alignment when it comes to digital marketing?
The reversal in trend is not necessarily that's a preferred trend. It's happening when the organization is in flux. In terms of what's going on with the digitization, we absolutely need the most alignment, if not integration, between marketing and sales.
I think that is critical, right? Without alignment, you
yeah.
have two entities running separately. So what would you say is the most important thing to get that alignment going? What have you seen?
I think sorry, go ahead.
No, that's all right. I just wanted to ask you if you've got some examples of practices that have improved that alignment.
I think I would go back to the GE example where the most important thing was to make sure that a detailed assessment was done internally between marketing, sales, and new product development included, because that's one thing that seems to come back later on to haunt this lack of alignment, is to make sure you assess what are the implications of the changes that are going on outside for our current business. This has to be an honest internal assessment and then build whatever is the most relevant level of alignment for that organization to move forward, because we don't want to be prescriptive without context. I would go back to saying context, context, context.
And getting people to talk to each other early in the process.
Absolutely. With each other, with the customer's customer, and ensuring that other functions in the organizations are brought in. I think marketing and sales, the most critical nexus, no doubt, but marketing, sales, new product development, procurement, finance, I would say marketing's role in building that internal relational capital is going to be even more critical if it is going to be successful building the relational capital with external stakeholders.
Great. Well, so then there's a follow-on question that goes right into that. For both relational capital and the customer value, being close to the customers is really critical. And traditionally, sales claims that they're the ones that are close to customers. So how can marketing strengthen their position in building that relationship capital and customer value?
Sales is definitely close to accounts. There is no doubt. Marketing is close to segments and understanding what is going on in the larger, context. So there is no doubt that sales has its ears to the customers, but marketing guided, I would say, intelligence is probably the best way to go. And this is something that we have followed for a long time, and this is all the more critical now. Guided intelligence is something that we use a lot of times with our own clients, because what happens is in the age where you have information coming from so many sources and at such a fast pace, there is a lot of information that's irrelevant and plain waste of time. And making sure that you're not acting on those requires guided intelligence, and marketing's role is that guided intelligence.
Great. We have a clarification question. Earlier you mentioned that marketing spend is about 11% of budget. Is that the total budgeted company cost, or is that net sales? What is that total number? 11%
That's
of
the total budget. Total budget.
The total company, including all
That's
net
right.
sales.
That's
yeah,
right.
Okay, so it's 11%. Okay, great. Good to know. Okay, here's another question. What should be the behavior of marketers who want to see marketing as the driver of organic growth? What should we as marketers really be doing? Can you help us with that?
Sure. I think the first question is making sure that whoever is leading the marketing organization, first and foremost, the conversation has to happen within the marketing function to understand where is the business headed and what is the organization doing or not doing to be at its competitive best. What should it be doing, right? I think there is a very unique perspective in terms of tools, techniques, research, and knowledge. Then once that happens, I would kind of highly recommend that this be a conversation that the lead of the marketing organization has with the rest of the C-suite, the board, whoever they feel is the right audience for it. It's an educational role. Marketers are in a role to educate the organization. If marketing is being belittled, it's not because they don't understand marketing's worth. It's because they don't understand the role that marketing is going to play and needs to play in the larger betterment of business. So I think what marketers can do first and foremost is to understand how they can educate the organization. And this is not easy, but for whatever reason, it seems to be one of the most important things that need to happen if the rest has to follow.
So we had a question as well that said, so would you agree with this statement? Marketing is the most misunderstood word in business.
Undervalued word in some organizations. Yes, that is unfortunate, but that's because, once again, there has been so much of distraction with things going on around and information coming in from so many different areas and people acting on them impulsively that has been conducive to that behavior, which is not necessarily good business discipline. So marketing being undervalued is a very unfortunate event for organizations, and wherever organizations are thriving, marketing is king.
So can I see if I can summarize what I'm hearing you say? So it's one that everyone in the organization needs to understand what marketing is, and also to appreciate and respect that it is marketing's role to do the marketing job, as opposed to stepping in and doing something that looks like that, but maybe not strategically as well. Is that about right?
Yes, I think you're right, and I think in this the larger context of the world moving from mind to machine, I go back to that product to platform and core to crowd. Everyone in the organization has to have some understanding of marketing, and marketing is pivotal in making that journey happen for the business.
So in doing so, a few of us in the audience are in the top end of marketing leadership, and a lot of us are in the position of reporting to the leadership of marketing, but we're really in the working group. For those of us that are not in senior leadership, what can we be doing to make sure that marketing is well understood and appreciated in our organization?
Great question. I think to take your own area of responsibility and do a contextual interpretation there. It's very critical. If you are leading, for example, if you are leading channel marketing, if you're leading branding, if you are leading digital, if you are leading downstream marketing, please look at the larger context and spend a little bit of thinking time. Get together with your thought partners at ISBM or other resources and think through what are the implications of these mega changes for what my function is doing or my micro element is responsible for. I think connecting the dots, as I think I indicated before, micro to macro, and that is on a continuum. So my macro to my immediate macro, and then that needs to kind of build up. So whatever position you are in, these large sweeping changes have tremendous implications, and even by starting at that level will be a highly educational journey for your organization.
So are you suggesting, too, that I should share that mapping with my relative other job descriptions, right? So you talked about procurement and R&D. How would you suggest sharing that with those functions?
Yes, I think in order to keep them interested in the dialogue, I think while they would find it quite interesting what marketing, how marketing's role is being interpreted in the larger context, I think what would really get their interest is how marketing's interpretation of this reality and bringing it to fruition can help them create better customer value for their own constituents. And they are struggling with that very question. We have talked to people in procurement, we've talked to people in sales, we've talked to people in R&D, in product development, and everybody has that same question. How do I create better value in this unprecedentedly changing and unpredictable environment where 1 minute what I do is highly relevant, next minute I go into irrelevance, and marketing can help with staying, keeping them relevant and keeping them co-creating that value. So moment the value prop to the internal functions is, let us now help you understand how the value you create for your constituents can be consistent, then they are more interested in that conversation.
Good. So we have a question about guided intelligence. Can you give us a little bit more on that? What tools do you have that today's marketer can use to help us separate out what's relevant and what's not relevant?
I think, yeah, sure. I'm a big believer in research. I think marketers have always been extremely research-driven. They've been data-driven. And I think in the world of analytics, as some of the people we talked to said, now that analytics is owned by IT and everybody has their finger on, pulling down data and interpreting it, this interpretation of data without context, without history, leads to misguided intelligence. And I think where marketers come in is it's really ensuring that they utilize the history of their own knowledge, of what they have learned, bringing to bear the concepts of how some of these things should be interpreted, and then using that to say why something should be interpreted a certain way is probably the most important thing here. I don't think there is any magic new tool. It's really making sure that you are helping people understand what happens when you don't have guided intelligence. Lead with examples to show what happens when there was no guided intelligence, you made a decision, and it did not work out so well.
Okay, so I think if I understand your point, it's guided intelligence is giving you, you're looking for the data and you're making a decision, and it's not from seat of the pants or your gut feel or what happened last time. You're using that data. There's such a wealth of information, though. When you do the research, how do you manage to do that efficiently with all of the information that might be out there and information that might not be perfectly accurate either?
Yeah, I think that's you hit the nail on the head. That's another very important core competency today, is to make sure that you're able to get to the heart of things without getting lost in the weeds and details. And I think that's a trained mind, right? And that's part of the training, and that's why all the more important marketers are better trained to do that than anybody else in the organization, because you have looked at segments, you've looked at trends, you've looked at competitive maps, you've looked at roadmaps, and you know how these interface. And this is exactly the reason the guided intelligence needs to come from marketing. And one of the skill sets that marketers need to sharpen is the ability to show how you separate out the core from that which is irrelevant. I think that you demonstrating to the organization that there is this vast arena of information, but we were able to glean what is absolutely the core, and here's the golden nugget, go act on it, and success is yours. I think proving that is also very critical.
So, okay, so that's what I'm hearing, is that there is no magic tool that we can automate that will help us find that. That is our role, is to be the interpreter of information as all of it comes in, and telling the organization this is the important information, and that is our role, as opposed to trying to automate that, right?
Yeah, absolutely. In all the automation, I think you hit the nail on the head. In all the automation, when you look at what all the experts say about this whole transition of going from mind to machine, ultimately what rests as the most important human contribution is that ability to interpret at that very high level contextually, to say, what does this all mean? And within the organization, marketing has clearly the ability to do that better than any other function, because of the historical role as well as the vantage point that the marketing skill sets and tools bring to the fore.
Okay, so another interesting question. If you have others, please send them in. We'll see if we can fit it in here. But this one is, I think, cuts to it all. Our current Wall Street culture pushes for quarterly results, which are very short-term focused, and that's driven by sales, rather than marketing, which is a long-term focus. So what advice do you have to help marketers stay relevant in that environment?
Well, I think the street does reward long-term value. The street rewards promise. The street rewards brand equity. And I think while there is definitely the push to make sure that you're making your numbers in the short run, and the numbers don't look bad, marketers clearly can convey their own value proposition to their internal constituents by showing, if you did analysis over a period of time, and I think there are a lot of studies that have been done showing the trends between returns as well as investments in marketing, clearly the investments in branding, investments in customer experience, and today it's that the investment in helping businesses successfully co-create value, right? Which means this transition that I go back to, going from one level to the other, is going to be important for sustaining the future value of the business, which is what the street rewards. So I think it's how you interpret that, the short term and long term. And my belief is that all that marketing does is sustaining, and it's marketers' role to convey that internally with data.
Okay. All right, we have one more minute, so I'm going to take this one too, because I think this might be a useful learning tool. From all of the things you've been seeing, what are the biggest mistakes that you see marketing leadership make, and can we avoid those?
I'd always like to end with some humor. I think let's not throw ourselves a pity party, please. I think pity parties don't do anybody any good, and if we feel underappreciated, it's because people do not understand. And so let's take on the role of the seer. Let's take on the role of an educator. Let's reassess what the implications are for some of these larger trends that I talked about in the micro or the macro areas we're working, and see how that internal education and moving the organization towards better value creation can happen.
Good. Okay, well, thank you for that, Suj. And thank you again to the audience for your questions and your attention. We're going to close this second session, and I invite you all to have lunch. So we have gone from a physical meeting to this live online session as an experimentation and delivery. And one of the things that we miss together is having to break bread. So I'm sorry that we won't all be together for lunch. I hope that you have someone you're listening with and you can also visit with them for lunch. And we will see you back here at 12:45. At 12:45, we have a session that is a short session prior to Eric's talk. We have the presentation for 2 new fellows. And, one of the things that ISBM has, unlike any other organization, is this amazing collection of researchers doing work in our area, and we honor them by having them join the fellows group. So we have 2 inductees this year, one today and one tomorrow, and I hope you'll join us at 12:45 before the 1 o'clock session in order to hear that presentation from Gary Lillian. So again, I invite you to have lunch. If you're still having challenges or concerns connecting, please contact us, and otherwise I'll see you in about an hour and 15. Thank you very much.